Silence is the source of great strength. These words, attributed to Lao Tzu, carry a truth that modern life too often overlooks. In a world where noise is constant, where people shout to be seen, post to be heard, and argue to feel important, silence has become rare. But it is in silence that we find ourselves, and it is in focusing inward, not outward, that we truly rise. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. It is the beginning of all mastery, mental, emotional, spiritual. When you learn to stop watching what others are doing and start paying attention to how you're growing, everything changes. You stop competing, you stop comparing, you begin refining, you start showing up, not to impress the world, but to improve yourself. So many people waste their energy explaining themselves, defending their choices, proving their worth to people who are too distracted or too broken to understand. But here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your mind, your plans, or your spirit. Your focus is your power, and not everyone should be invited into that sacred space. In silence, your mind becomes sharper. You begin to notice the thoughts that guide you, the habits that define you, and the emotions that shape your reality. You begin to take responsibility. You stop blaming the world and start building yourself. You train, you heal, you elevate, and you do it without announcing every step. Books like The 48 Laws of Power and Atomic Habits speak to the power of internal work, quiet moves, and long-term vision. But nothing teaches this better than life itself. The most powerful people are often the quietest ones, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they don't need to say it. Their life speaks, their discipline echoes, their peace radiates. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you gain control. Every time you focus on your routine instead of someone else's opinion, you gain progress. Every time you decide to show rather than tell, you earn respect. Not the kind that comes from attention, but the kind that comes from alignment. Focus doesn't require noise, it requires commitment. And when you combine deep focus with intentional silence, you become unstoppable. You become the person who no longer needs validation because you found direction. You no longer need applause because you found purpose. And you no longer need noise because your results speak louder than any words ever could. Stay silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because your energy is better spent growing, learning, and building. Stay focused, not because you're unaware of what others are doing, but because you've realized none of it matters more than what you are doing. Protect your peace like it's gold, because it is. Protect your focus like it's fire, because it will burn away every distraction if you keep it alive. And protect your silence like it's sacred, because in that silence, you're not just surviving, you're becoming. Let the world make noise, you make progress. Focus on yourself, stay silent, and watch what happens. Real growth happens in silence, not through announcement, but through transformation. The world teaches us to broadcast our intentions, to declare our goals loudly, to share every step we take toward becoming something more. But true transformation rarely begins with a spotlight. It begins in quiet, often uncomfortable places, far from the applause, far from recognition. It begins when no one is watching. It begins when you're sitting with yourself, asking the hard questions, facing your flaws, and choosing day after day, not to be loud, but to be better. Silence gives birth to depth. In the absence of noise, you start to hear what really matters. You start to notice what needs to change, not on the outside, but within. Growth isn't always visible in the beginning. A seed doesn't shout its potential, it disappears into the soil. It breaks apart in darkness, and yet beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. In that same way, your growth is sacred in the silence. It doesn't need to be validated, it needs to be nurtured. The modern world celebrates declarations. Social media thrives on updates, timelines, and curated images of success. But there's something deeply powerful about keeping your transformation to yourself. Not out of fear, not because you're hiding, but because you understand the strength in process. You know that announcing your growth prematurely invites opinions, pressure, and sometimes even resistance. So you choose instead to protect the process. You tend to your inner garden. You do the work that cannot be posted. Transformation is not a performance. It's a commitment. It's waking up early not to prove anything, but because you've promised yourself a better life. It's studying when you could be scrolling. It's saying no when your old self would have said yes. It's choosing discipline over distraction, not once, but repeatedly. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, and it doesn't demand attention, but slowly, steadily, it shapes you. You become someone who no longer needs to convince others of who you are becoming. You stop seeking approval and start living with alignment. Your life begins to mirror your intention, and that quiet alignment becomes louder than any words ever could. People begin to notice, not because you told them to, but because your energy has shifted, your presence has deepened, and your peace has grown unshakable. This is how real growth works. It's internal before it's external. It's silent before it's seen. And by the time it reveals itself to the world, it's already rooted so deeply within you that no opinion can shake it. So embrace the quiet. Embrace the solitude. Let the silence become your sanctuary, your training ground, your place of rebirth. You are not falling behind because you're not loud about your progress. You are moving ahead in the most powerful way through unshakable, invisible transformation. Focusing on yourself is the foundation of confidence, clarity, and control. In a world that constantly pulls your attention outward toward opinions, comparisons, distractions, and endless noise, the simple act of turning inward becomes revolutionary. When you choose to focus on your own growth, your own healing, your own habits, you begin to reclaim your energy from the places where it has been scattered. You stop living reactively. You stop being shaped by the chaos outside you. Instead, you begin to create your life from a place of inner direction, not outer demand. Confidence doesn't come from what others think of you. It comes from knowing who you are when no one is watching. It comes from keeping promises to yourself, waking up when you said you would, honoring your boundaries, doing the hard things, not because someone told you to, but because you chose it for yourself. The more you keep your word to yourself, the more you trust yourself, and the more you trust yourself, the less you care about external validation. You walk differently, not arrogantly, but firmly. You don't need to be the loudest in the room because your energy speaks for you. Clarity is born in solitude. When you stop chasing what everyone else is doing, when you step away from the noise of comparison, you start to hear your own voice again. You start to ask the deeper questions. What do I really want? What matters to me? What am I building and why? You stop moving just to keep up and you start moving with purpose. Your life begins to reflect your inner truth, not the expectations of the world. And with clarity comes peace, not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that comes from alignment. Control isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. It's knowing that you may not control every situation, but you always control your response. When you're focused on yourself, you stop giving away your power to distractions, to drama, to the opinions of people who don't live your life. You no longer need to react to everything. You don't need to prove yourself, defend yourself, or seek constant approval. You've done the work within, and that internal structure becomes your stability in every storm. It's easy to think that focusing on yourself is selfish, but it's actually one of the most selfless things you can do, because when you are whole within yourself, you show up better for the people around you. You don't take your frustrations out on others. You don't need to tear anyone down to feel good. You don't use others for validation or attention. You give from a place of fullness, not lack. You love with boundaries. You serve with strength, and your presence becomes a source of calm and clarity for others because you found it within. When you stay focused on yourself, you move differently. You're not chasing, you're building. You're not reacting, you're choosing. You're not scattered, you're centered. And slowly, the life you used to dream about begins to take shape, not because you forced it to happen overnight, but because you stayed committed to the work that really matters. You stayed with yourself even when it was hard. You prioritized your own path even when others didn't understand. And in doing so, you became someone rooted, resilient, and quietly powerful. That is the gift of focus. It's not always visible in the beginning. It's not always understood, but it is always worth it. Silence is not weakness. It is the mark of discipline and power. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, to be seen, to be heard, silence is often misunderstood. People associate quietness with passivity or submission. But in truth, silence can be the most commanding presence in a room. It is in silence that strength gathers. It is in silence that wisdom settles. And it is in silence that power is refined, not flashy, not loud, but enduring. There is a strength in withholding your reactions, in choosing not to respond to every insult, every misunderstanding, every moment that tugs at your ego. That is not weakness, that is maturity. To know that not every situation requires your energy. To understand that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to say nothing at all, because silence is not about avoidance, it's about discernment. It means you've learned to choose your battles. It means you no longer feel the need to explain your worth, your plans, or your progress. Discipline is what gives birth to that kind of silence. It takes restraint not to react. It takes strength to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it, explain it, or escape it. Silence teaches you patience. It sharpens your self-control. It allows you to observe more than you speak. And in doing so, you begin to understand things others miss. People's intentions, patterns, energy, truth behind words. The one who listens more than they talk often sees more than they reveal. Power doesn't always look like control over others. Real power begins with self-mastery. It's the ability to regulate your emotions, to hold your ground without needing applause, to trust your direction even when the noise around you gets louder. Silence is the language of the focused. It is the atmosphere of those who are building something real. While others are chasing approval, competing for attention, and reacting to every wave, the disciplined person stays anchored, working in the quiet, steady in their purpose. Silence also protects your peace. It creates space between stimulus and response. That space is where wisdom lives. When you're constantly speaking, reacting, or venting, you're leaking energy. But when you learn to pause, to breathe, to reflect before you act, you become less fragile, less influenced, more intentional. Silence is not emptiness, it's clarity. It allows you to move with direction instead of impulse. Even spiritually, silence has deep significance. In stillness, people have found divine guidance. In the quiet, hearts are searched, motives are revealed, and inner transformation begins. There's a reason many sacred practices include silence. It is in that sacred quiet where transformation takes place. Not in the chaos of noise, but in the calm of presence. You don't have to shout to have impact. You don't have to be loud to be heard. When your actions speak clearly, your words can rest quietly. Silence is a decision, a discipline, a sign of self-respect. It's the proof that you no longer need to respond to be in control. You are in control because you've chosen mastery over reaction, purpose over attention, peace over performance. You do not need to be known by many, only deeply understood by few. You do not need to perform to prove. You are becoming something greater in the stillness than you ever could in the noise. So if you're growing silently, healing quietly, building in the background, do not underestimate what's happening within you. That is where the real change begins. Stay committed to your inner world, and one day your outer world will reflect the strength you've been cultivating in silence all along.